So let's take a moment and let's hold in our consciousness today, of course, that Gulf Coast of these United States. And let's hold all those people in prayer during the week and just pray for the safety of all of them, the safety of all the pets, and the safety of all the beautiful rescue volunteers that are going in there that are helping them. So, Great Spirit, we give thanks for all the joy and the enthusiasm in our sanctuary. And we give thanks for the rain that we have been receiving. We give thanks that 1,400 lakes that are in Lake County are now full. And we pray for all the world leaders. We pray that they're listening to their higher selves, that they're tuned into their intuition, and that they're making decisions accordingly for the whole global planet, for all of us. And we come here to remind one another of who we are, that we are children of God, that we're made in the image and likeness of God. And so we come here to see if there's anybody that can remind us, or something in a song that helps us contemplate or reflect on anything that's in the way of really our full unfoldment into the divine beings that we are. And we pray for all the children of the world. We pray that they're getting acclimated to their new teachers, new classrooms, and that they're learning, and that they're blessed with enough love, enough food, enough housing, and that they get to realize their full divine potential and realize all their dreams. And for the teachings of Jesus the Christ, we say thank you, God. Amen. Amen. And let us say our vision together. A world powerfully transformed through the growing movement of shared spiritual awakening. Our mission? In love and unity, we nurture and inspire spiritual growth by modeling and teaching universal spiritual principles. And our values? Welcoming, diverse, prayerful, transformative, And our statement of being, God is all, both invisible and visible. One presence, one mind, one power is all. This one that is all is perfect life, perfect love, and perfect substance. I am an individualized expression of God. I am everyone with this perfect life, perfect love, and perfect substance.
Good morning, everybody. This first selection is a song by Rebecca St. James, and it's a story coming from the viewpoint of Mary Magdalene. She was not exactly a good girl. She had some issues, and then she meets Jesus, and this is what happens. I've sinned, come on my knees, for I'm not worthy of your love. How could you die for me? Such grace could only come from God. Oh Lord, you search and you know me. You see me inside out. God, you alone can forgive me. Erase my fear and my doubt. Spirit, you pick me up. I feel like a child in your arms. I don't deserve this love, but I hear the voice of Jesus go and sin no more. He said, I will not condemn you. I forgive it, I forget it all. Go and sin no more. My child, let me remind you, it is I who lead and guide you as you go. Love is my purpose. Love is the reason that I live. I want to be like you. Help me to love and to forgive. God, help me not be distracted. Lord, help me focus on you. Keep sin from ruining my life, Lord. Make me holy and pure. Spirit, you pick me up. I feel like a child in your arms. I don't deserve this love, but I hear the voice of Jesus go and sin no more. He said, I will not condemn you. I'll forgive it, I'll forget it all. Go and sin no more. My child, let me remind you, it is I who lead and guide you as you go. Wipe away. Take away. Break away. Fill my life, make it right. Spirit help me go. Go and sin no more. He said, I will not condemn you.
morning. My name is Norm Bogert, licensed Unity teacher here, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to Unity Spiritual Center. Unity Spiritual Center is the place where we love, serve, and know God through our prayers, our meditations, our Sunday services, our classes, and our community celebrations. We appreciate the talents of our musical team. Now it's time to get up out of your seats and give a rip-roaring rendition of the Joy song that the words will be on the screen. You didn't know you had all that power, did you? Well done. If this is your first time with us, welcome to Unity. We're glad you're here, and we would appreciate it if you would wear a name badge. That way we get to know you by your first name, and we can greet you that way. If you would like a guest packet, and the guest packet looks like this, you can get one. If you haven't already got one, you can get one at the welcoming table right outside the sanctuary door on your left. And there's also going to be volunteers there that will answer any questions that you have about the church or what we do here. You're never alone on the road of life, and you are not alone here. There will be more time to greet each other after the service and enjoy refreshments with our community room. Got a big feast today, being the last Sunday of the month, and that happens across the library in the fellowship hall. It is time for our community greeting. That means it's time for our vitamin H, because we are a hugging community. or handshake. If you would prefer not to get a hug, simply extend your hand and we'll welcome you with a handshake. After just a couple of minutes, you will hear a musical interlude or a bell, and if that doesn't work, you'll hear me talking to you. But it's a signal to get back to your seats so that we can go on with the service. So it's time to get hugging. You all done good, man. Now Mary Lou Mason will give us a board update, and then the prayer chaplain, who is Steve Kemp today, will read the daily word and spiritual power of the month, and we'll bless the prayer.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. This is the monthly report that provides you the actions that your Board of Trustees accomplished during the period of July 12th of this year through August 23rd. The word unity has several definitions, with ones that closely represent Unity Spiritual Center. Those being, it's a state of being one. It's a state of oneness of mind, feeling among a number of persons. And it's also harmony among parts of work to produce a single major effect. I truly believe that this is what the board and the congregants here are working toward. And this is truly seeing the divine in each other. Can I get an amen for that? So the report is, youth education, Dee Babel and Ed Taylor are continuing to put this program together to see if there's interest in our community. And it would be an outdoor program in the fall for children in this area. There's a membership meeting coming up, an important membership meeting coming up October 29th for voting on the Unity Spiritual Center bylaws changes to bring us up in line with Worldwide Ministries. All Unity members are encouraged to attend and vote. The board members were very satisfied with the different guest ministers who filled in while Reverend Marge was on her sabbatical leave. Congregants tell us that they enjoyed the guest ministers and their spiritual messages. Reverend Marge returns to Unity Spiritual Center relaxed and renewed after her sabbatical leave. She enjoyed quiet reflection time in Virginia, at different state parks, and family time in North Carolina. The sabbatical allowed her to regroup and regain spiritual guidance, and she's anxious to continue moving Unity Spiritual Center forward as a living spiritual home for all. We did receive a letter from Seco, however you say it, Electric Company, requesting permission for a land easement on the Pine Tree property to install a 14-foot gate, in which they would hire the contractor and take no responsibility for the contractor, and it was up to us to maintain the property after. After contact with our attorney and discussion of the request, the board decided to unanimously reject the Seco request without more information. The attendance reports are that July and August attendance reports to date average around 112 people. The abundance report for July, income and expenses, there was a net ordinary income year-to-date of $1,382.06. This is not unusual as we await our full complement of congregants from the north. And the Dome Committee, July 2017, received commitments, and that is up to 85.3% of the commitments, and the cash on hand with the Dome Committee is $47,147.85. I think that's remarkable.
morning, everyone. I'm Steve Camp. And would the prayer chaplains that are being in service today please rise? Okay. If you have any prayer needs at all, we have 2 prayer rooms, one on either side of the podium here. And after the service, just touch one of the prayer chaplains and they'll be happy to give you, be with you in prayer. Or you can just grab one of us out on the floor. Today's reading is about prosperity. And I'm reading from the Daily Word, which is also available in our bookstore, just off the community room. It's based upon Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 10. I, the Lord, test the mind and search the heart, to give to all according to their ways, according to the fruit of their doings. As I am paying bills, I may feel frustrated with my debt-to-income ratio. I pray for abundance and repeat affirmations. Why then does it seem as though the creative laws of abundance aren't working for me? I am approaching prosperity from a belief in lack. My focus is on my perceived needs, since what I focus on increases in my life. What I am doing is creating more needs, the opposite of my conscious intention. So I shift my focus to spirit within. I learn to appreciate the ways in which prosperity is already present in my life. I open my mind to divine ideas, which immediately guide me to resources and channels. Prosperity comes to me in new and wonderful ways. And if we can all say the affirmation, I open my mind to divine ideas and new avenues of supply are revealed. The spiritual power of the month of August is wisdom. The corresponding color is yellow. The center of wisdom is located in the pit of the stomach. Wisdom is the ability to attract, unify, and desire. Wisdom is represented by Mary of Nazareth and John, son of Zebedee. Please join me in saying the affirmation. I understand with the wisdom of my divine intelligence, and I guide it into right action. And now we have the blessing of the prayer mothers. Let's just close our eyes and drop into our heart space. And we put our attention to this prayer box and the names that are in it. And we know that they are being divinely guided because there is within each of them that spark of all that God is. And so we rise above any concerns, any images that block that wholeness. And we know that divine order provides for their needs of mind, body, and spirit. And so we let go, and we let God be God in their lives. And so it is. Amen. And I'm staying up here because I'm going to have a moment of truth. It happened while I signed up for a course which some of you know about, the Eye of the Storm that Nettie's going to be giving starting September 3rd and September 6th. I have familiarity with the author of this, Gary Simmons, because he was also the co-founder of another, actually I think this came out of this, but it was called The Art and Practice of Living with Nothing and No One Against You. And that's essentially what this book is about. But when I began to read it, so while it wasn't new information, it touched me very, very deeply. And I realized that even now, with over 3 years of working, following the principles that are outlined in this book, I still have a little bit of that stuff that's left over from long, long ago. And I want to also mention that it was 3 years ago that I was having consternation and conflict with our minister. And I made no bones about it, and I resisted, and I fought back, literally, only I did it very directly to her in emails. And her response was, perhaps you should consider taking this training, which was the Q process, which is what's behind all of this. And I harumphed, but I listened, and I took it. And it was, believe me, it was a transforming moment in my life, the beginning of one at least. Because over these past 3 years, I've applied those principles and really discovered that there is no one against me, unless I see it that way. And occasionally I do, but the tools, and so I'm saying all of this because I know absolutely that this works. We can each be in an environment where no matter what's happening out there, we still have love in our hearts and we have understanding. And this book, I encourage you that if you're dealing with any of those kinds of feelings or things that block you from really having peace of mind and joy in your heart, most of the time at least, then I encourage you to take this class because it's going to be transformative if you apply yourself. So that's my message.
Hello again. I don't know. I've got a big mouth, you can hear me. This song, oh, okay, sorry. Open my eyes. Change it a little bit.
And as we train ourselves to spend just 25, 30 minutes a day in meditation, those glimpses of truth are revealed. And anything that's blocking our spiritual good, it will bubble up in meditation or in the quiet time thereafter. And so let us just keep breathing deeply, thank the thoughts that are passing through, and relax in the quiet.
This is an Amy Grant song. Since the word of the month is wisdom, the power of the month is wisdom, sometimes I've found in my life that I have to overlook things, circumstances, people, attitudes, and just try and love. And that's what this song is called. That's what love is for.
Sometimes we make it harder than it is. We take a perfect night, fill it up with words we don't mean, dark side best unseen, and we wonder why we're feeling this way. Sometimes I wonder if we really feel the same, how we can be unkind, questioning the strongest of hearts. That's when we must start believing in the one thing that has gotten us this far. Give us strength to try once more. Baby, that's what love is for. Sometimes I see you and you don't know I'm there, and I'm washed away by emotions I hold deep down inside, getting stronger with time. It's getting through the fire and holding on with mine. That's what love is for, to help us through it. That's what love is for. Nothing else can do it. Build our defenses, bring us back to our senses, give us strength to try once more. Yeah, that's what love is for. That's what love is for, to help us through it. That's what love is for. Nothing else can do it. Melt our defenses, bring us back from the edges, give us strength to try once more. Baby, that's what love is for.
Thank you, guys. Hector's rather comical to watch as usual. Has anybody noticed that? All right, I want to thank some of the people that have worked in this ministry this week. Steve and Joni Spires, Rhonda Hall helped us out, Denny and the chaplains, Norm, Angela filled in for Karin, and Karin will be back this week. Thank you, God. And of course, Barbara and Reese in hospitality, our great media team up there that's growing. You like that? And our choir was fabulous last week, weren't they? Yeah. And we had to call on Bill Ralston, our expert, and he came and made a few adjustments. And I want to thank our board who put in extra time this week. So thank you, everybody. Let's see, yes, so take advantage if that Iowa Storm class fits in your schedule. You'll be taught it by Denny, and she's been in Unity 30 years. She was actually taught it by the author, so it's a great book and a great class and transformative. 9/11 would be a great time to come together, so we're having Bob Sima, a New Thought artist, if you look him up on the web. He's also a breath worker, so we'll be doing some praying and meditation and listening to his music. And then further on in that week is, of course, World Day of Prayer. So the chaplains have a great program planned, and we hope that you can come and join us. You ready for a joke? Okay. A woman brought in a very limp parrot into a veterinary hospital, and she laid her pet on the table, and the vet pulled out the stethoscope, listened to the bird's chest. After a moment or two, the vet shook his head sadly and said, I'm sorry that Polly has already passed. So the distressed owner wailed and said, are you sure? I mean, you haven't even done any testing or anything, and he might just be in a coma or something. So the vet rolled his eyes and shrugged, turned, left the room. After a few moments, he came back with a big, beautiful black Labrador. So the bird's owner looked on with amazement, but the dog went up on its hind legs, put the front paws on the exam table, sniffed the dead parrot from top to bottom. Then he looked at the vet with sad eyes and said, just shook his head. So the vet let the dog out, but returned a few minutes later with the cat. The cat jumped up, also sniffed delicately at the bird, and the cat sat back, shook its head, meowed, and ran out of the room. So the vet looked at the woman and said, I'm sorry, but like I said, your parrot is most definitely 100% certifiably dead. He then turned to his computer terminal, hit a few keys, produced a bill, which he handed to the woman. The parrot's owner, still in shock, took the bill. She said, $150. $150 just to tell me my bird is dead? And the vet shrugged and he said, well, if you'd taken my word for it, the bill would have been $20, but with the lab report and the CAT scan. Did you expect? All right. So let's see. We're going to study something on wisdom today, a parable that's often confused. And so this is a picture of Solomon. If anybody is not familiar with that story, Solomon is that king who said is the wisest one because he asked for wisdom. And then there were two women that said they each had were the mothers of this one baby, and Solomon, in all his wisdom, said, well, bring the baby to me, I'll cut it in half. And then he knew that the real mother would say, oh no, stop, the other woman can have it, and then he knew the real mother. So the power of wisdom is located in our fourth chakra. It's the dorsal region of the spine, between the shoulder blades actually. It's coupled with our love faculty. And we spend time on these 12 powers because they're spiritual tools, spiritual technology, if you will. And if we call upon them, even for a couple minutes a day, then they become stronger in our lives, and then all of a sudden we realize that we're actually using them in our lives. And these parables, all the parables that Jesus teaches, refer or describe things about the inner workings of us, about our thoughts and our attitudes as individuals. And so let us take a moment, and the parable is a bit long. It's in the 16th chapter of Luke, if anybody wants to read it this week during all the rainy time that the golf will be not as good as it usually is in the sunshine, right? Right? I mean, a couple of my neighbors are bummed. I mean, they're doing all kinds of things now. Okay, so here's how it goes. Then Jesus said to the disciples, there was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was squandering his property. So he summoned him, and he said to him, what is this that I hear about you? Give me an accounting of your management, because you cannot be my manager any longer. So then the manager said to himself, well, now what am I going to do? Now that my master is taking the position away from me, I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm not strong enough to beg. I'm ashamed to beg. I've decided what to do is that when I'm dismissed as manager, I want people to still welcome me in their homes. So, summoning his master's debtors one by one, he asked the first one, hey, how much do you owe my master? And the first one said, 100 jugs of oil. He said to the man, take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 50. Then he asked another, and how much do you owe? He replied, 100 containers of wheat. He said to him, okay, take your bill and make it out to 80. And his master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the children of his age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. And I tell you, make friends for yourself by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into the eternal homes. A little bit more. Whoever is faithful in a very little is faithful also in much. And whoever is dishonest in a very little is dishonest also in much. If then you have not been faithful with the dishonest wealth, who will entrust to you the true riches? And if you have not been faithful with what belongs to another, who will give you what is your own? No slave can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. So, what is this parable really about? So it's really about states of consciousness. It's a parable about stewardship. It's not a lesson in shrewd business. It's a lesson in spiritual, metaphysical logic. Here's a guy, he understands what the big boss is telling him, that he is not born fruit, he's born rather dead. So he hasn't done a good job, and then he has to figure out, well, what am I going to do from here? So he calls on these people, and what he does is he tries to reconcile and figure out what is the most that they can easily pay, and then he settles it, and then he lets it go. So he still wants to be welcomed into their home. So he's doing what he needs to do, and he's doing it in a nice manner. And then what he does is he forgives the rest of the debt. So we use the Bible as a spiritual book. We can say it's a field guide to higher consciousness. And that's because we are every person and every event in the Bible. And so it helps us if we look inside of ourselves in terms of which characters we are. We're usually all of them, and what we can learn from them. It's a way of looking at it and applying it to how we're thinking and feeling in different situations and communicating. Okay, so wealth is, as it refers, mammon, is just material wealth, is all that means. And it means that true wealth is the inner riches of our mind, which are understanding and the realization of the spiritual substance and intelligence that back every outer manifestation. So, and what it says is, if the disciples had not complied with the best they understood about life and material wealth before they embarked on a spiritual path, how could they be entrusted with higher responsibility? They should not vacillate between the Christ mind and the world ideal, because as the scripture said, no servant can serve two masters. So it's about levels of consciousness here. And, you know, I was listening to a professor this week on one of the PBS stations, and she was talking about a new word. I think she's a professor of English. What was it? Relatability. And she says, you know, our society is so hooked up and linked in now to what we like and dislike, like and dislike, like and dislike. And what she said is, she said, we tend to like that is like us, that if we can relate to it, it's like us, so we like it. And she says, this is kind of a sorry description of where we are as a society, because how do we let in new things, new thoughts, new inventions, new ways of being, new ideas, new cultures? If we're going to only like that which is us, how can we actually evolve? So back to the parable. So what is the meaning of this kind of philosophy? Well, Elizabeth Sand Turner writes that the persons who accept Jesus are sons of light, and of course, Course in Miracles, we're all in the sonship. She says, yet are they as loyal to the higher standards as sons of the world are? So we strive in our consciousness to be sons of light. And one of the messages of this parable is that Jesus is saying, you know, the guy did the best that he could, the best that he knew how to do. And he says, sons of light sometimes just stay where we are and don't continue to grow and evolve. So that is one of the lessons of this parable. So people come, we all come from our knowledge base. The disciples were still men of the world. They were not yet disciples of the teaching of the spiritual world. And then it goes on to say, the rich man in the parable is us. And how we handle different aspects of our lives is how the manager handled the different businesses he was responsible for. So the question is, are we growing through the situations in our lives? When we're growing through the experiences of our lives, we're being good stewards. This means we have the understanding that everything that comes to us comes through us as divine ideas from the creative force, and we can draw from them good to form whatever it is we want. So it doesn't matter what happens, we can always get some good from an event, can we not? And so if we invest our energy in these forms, lovingly, generously, and faithfully, if and only then we're being wise stewards. And that's our main role here, is to create. And then we say we're in the flow because we receive blessings and we prosper in all ways. But then sometimes we create debt in our life, meaning we're not living in alignment, shall we say. We're not using the creative force lovingly, generously, faithfully. Well-known Unity minister and scholar Ed Rabel says, if we're not growing through our experiences in life, then we're jamming up the flow somehow and we're creating debt. And he says that when we trip up ourselves, the main areas that it shows up in are health, our finances, and our relationships. So our debt shows up because we're not letting life flow through us. We're still trying to control it, and we're trying to hang on, and when we do that, we literally stop making progress. Anybody ever done that? And another way we get hung up is through lack of forgiveness. Lack of forgiveness is an indication of lack of spiritual consciousness. It means if you don't understand how universal law works, it means it doesn't matter how many years you say you're a truth student, if you continue to spread negativity, you have not gotten to first base. And it means the lessons in that first book of Lessons in Truth were never really learned. So that's a free PDF if anybody wants to review that, Lessons in Truth on the web. It's a great book to review all the time, isn't it? Yeah. If we hang on to stuff, we're stuck. You know, some people can recall a thing that happened 40 years ago in their marriage or 20 years ago in a friendship, and they can retell it and retell it and retell it, and it means we're stuck. And it's better to be like Teflon and just let it all pass through. So what's the best approach here for when things happen? Well, Jesus applauds the manager for doing his best. because he did the best that he knew how from the knowledge base that he was. He takes care the best way from the level of consciousness, he forgives the rest, and he does it in a nice way. He still wants to be welcomed into the home. And so to have the faculty of wisdom, we must listen. We can gain information and we can dissect it and we can analyze it in all ways, and that's good. That's part of wisdom. And then when we've done our best, that's when we need to really sit in the quiet. When we sit in the quiet, then we stop our thinking, all those thoughts get distilled, and then wisdom floats over, doesn't it? Kind of a don't care see is what they say. So several years ago, I was trying to get to the bottom of a food and nutrition marketing tool that had been prominent in that business for a long time. And I really had the feeling that it wasn't true. And so I did a lot of research, and I just really couldn't find where it wasn't true. And but I knew that it just wasn't true. And so then I called a friend that is a colleague, and she's got a PhD in nutrition, and I said, no, this isn't true. And she says, well, what does the evidence-based library say about it, which is, how they regulate how true something is. And I said, well, the evidence-based library gives it a 4, which is really high. It's 1 out of 5, so it's a 4. She said, well, therein lies your answer. Now, at the time, I happened to be fasting for a few days, and I was really clear, and I kept praying about this because I just knew it wasn't true. And then I kind of got woken up in the middle of the night, and I was guided to poke around the internet, and sure enough, I found what I had been looking for. And what had happened was the person that did most of this research was was the one that was marketing this and kept propelling this into the business. But at the bottom of a Huffington Post article was who that person was getting money from, and of course it was one of the largest companies that was propelling this into our society. So wisdom requires intellect and thinking and discernment, yet real wisdom comes in after we do all of that, and then we have the really good questions and we sit in the stillness, and that's where we kind of really get it. So whether we bear fruit in our spiritual lives depends on how, as rich people, we use our resources. Do we fritter them away? Do we engage in negative comments? Because scholar Ed Rabel, and Unity minister Ed Rabel, he says this is still one of the most powerful forces we have, is our words. Or are we using our powers of discernment to determine what will actually let into our consciousness? Now, I'm not one of those people who believes in burying one's head in the sand, because I believe that that's how societies get taken over. But we have to really be discerning about who we listen to. And sometimes we might have friends that give us regularly half the truth because that's part of their perception, but if we find out it's really not the whole truth. And so, in other words, what's the quality of our environment and what's the quality of the information we're letting into our consciousness to really discern wisdom and to discern truth? So how do we put that wisdom into practice? Well, we need to remember that we're the masters in that parable. And so we're the masters of our consciousness in all areas of our life. And that when we know that and we have that and we regulate accordingly, that wisdom comes in. Namaste. And is there anybody here for the very first time? You are. Okay, well, we would like to give you a blessing. We love you, we bless you, we appreciate you, and we behold Christ to you. All right. And now it's time in our service when we get to contribute, I believe. Is it time? Yes. Our blessings, our tithes, our offerings. So as you have your offering and your blessing in your hand, let us affirm divine love as He blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive, and I am grateful. might hate the long song, some people hate the short song, some people hate this, some people like that. It is just what it is. So let us join consciousness with us up here and give thanks for first the givers of these gifts who give to a world where there is shared spiritual awakening. That means the God force is raised higher and higher in each individual, and we are creating a more peace-filled and kind planet. So we see these going out there multiplied many times and manifesting that. And for this we give thanks in the name and in the nature of Jesus the Christ. Amen. All right, and we can get into our community circle.
All right. Ready? Yeah, moving. We got a branch.